You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, we are going to talk about narrative summary and narrative commentary. It's kind of just a topical episode instead of part of a series. We did a palate cleanse last time. This time, I'm just bringing it up because it's come up so often and I talk about it so often, I decided it was probably going to need to be a podcast episode. So we're going to dive into providing narrative commentary, narrative summary in play sessions, what that looks like, considerations, how to implement, etc. Before I do, a huge thank you to each of you who attended the live episode, 300th episode. What a huge accomplishment. We celebrated together. This is all of our celebration and win, not mine. And it was so amazing. We recorded that on Friday. We posted the episode on Saturday. And that Saturday, when that 300th episode was posted, it was the 3-year anniversary of the start of the podcast. So on the 3-year anniversary, we published the 300th episode. Really cool the way everything lined up. And I'm just really grateful to each and every one of you. Thank you for those of you who were able to attend and hang out with me. It was about an hour and a half, lots of Q&A, lots of discussion. And it was just lovely to have faces and names and conversation. So I appreciate y'all. Okay, so let's talk about narrative summary, narrative commentary. Why am I bringing this up? Well, a lot of reasons, I suppose, but probably the number one is pretty consistently, I get questions and posts in the collective and people wondering, what do you do and say to remain adherent to CCPT when the child is quiet? And it's kind of funny to me because I know everyone has their thing, right? Every CCPT has their thing that is tricky, their thing that challenges them, their thing that kind of bothers them a little bit, that they struggle with, whatever. So I think a lot of people struggle with silence. I personally don't, but I think that is a really difficult thing for a lot of CCPTs because I'm asked about it all the time. And here's what ends up happening. If we think about the reflective responses, we can always offer one of the three. We can either reflect content, whatever the child is saying to us, we say back in paraphrased form. If you say it exactly, you're going to get yelled at for being a robot and copying. So that's just your public service announcement for the day. If the kid says, I'm going to build a tower, don't you dare say, you're going to build a tower, because that gets irritating to a child real fast and they'll call you out. But we're going to reflect the content of what the child says. However, that's eliminated when a child is quiet. Then we have the option of reflecting feelings. If the child is quiet and playing something repetitively, for example, there's probably not a lot of emotion to identify. Therefore, we don't really have the opportunity to reflect feeling in that moment either. So you have a quiet child that's not emoting. Now, all of a sudden, we're left with just tracking behavior. And that also becomes very laborious and monotonous very quickly, because how many times, if a child is coloring a paper, how many times can you say, you changed to that color, you colored that there, you switched to that side of the paper, you picked up that colored pencil? I mean, holy Moses, it's like, please, can we do something else? And I think that's why it's so uncomfortable. And I think that's why it's so difficult, because if we're left with just tracking behavior, it makes it very tricky to not feel like it is just the most repetitive, irritating kind of dialogue. The child's not engaging verbally. The child's not engaging emotionally. Therefore, all we're left with is say what we see them doing. And they start to just want you to stop talking. So then this is where narrative summary, narrative commentary comes in. This goes beyond just the tracking of behavior. And if you integrate both together in fluid conversation, it makes it flow. There's fluidity to the interaction so that it's not just one track to the next to the next. Here's my baseball analogy. And this is actually why I'm doing this podcast episode, because I was on a coaching call this week and somebody asked about if you're just tracking behavior, that becomes really boring. And I said, well, that's when you have to use narrative commentary. And the baseball analogy popped into my head about the color commentators. So if you're not a baseball fan, just go with me. I promise you'll understand this. So when you watch a baseball game, by the way, the Tampa Bay Rays team for the broadcast of Dwayne Stats and Brian Anderson, they are constantly rated top tier broadcast and commentators across all of the majors. So we have an amazing commentator duo for the Rays. If you've never watched a Rays game, you should. They are top tier commentators. They're fantastic to listen to. So here's what happens. You have the main commentator. In our case, it's Dwayne Stats. The role of the main commentator is to describe the action. So the entire focus of the main commentator, in our case, Dwayne, is to help someone that is not at the game understand what is happening. You can liken that to tracking behavior. I hope you're seeing where this is going, because they are describing action. When I'm not at the game, Dwayne is going to tell me what's happening in the game. However, there is never just one commentator on a broadcast. Why? Because the other one is the color commentator. Now, here's the disclaimer. This is very much a United States phrase. So for those of you international listeners, hello and welcome, by the way. I know you're all over the world. Glad you're here. You have no idea what a color commentator is. In other countries, they typically call them summarizers or commentators. So I just want to let you know that color commentator is kind of unique to the States as far as a term. And I find it very ironic that they call them in other countries summarizers and commentators, because we're talking about narrative summary and narrative comments. So fascinating how this is all tying together. It's divine intervention. The color commentator, the whole purpose of having two people, because you have the guy that describes the action, or the girl, I suppose, usually male. You have the guy describing the action, and then you have the guy providing color commentary. What does that mean? They provide humor and insight. So one's describing the action, and then one is kind of talking in general with humor and insight. This is exactly what narrative commentary and narrative summary is. So rather than just going, you switched to that color, you picked up the pencil, you're coloring there, you shaded that in, you drew that, you moved to that corner of the paper. Okay, that's describing action, tracking behavior in its purest form. If you want to add some bigger picture insight, you can do the narrative summary, narrative commentary. You're working on filling up the entire paper. You're making sure that you're not just using a few colors, you're making sure that you're using lots of colors. Here's what you're doing. You're giving some perspective, you're giving some insight, and often you can do it in a very lighthearted way. Now, you're not intentionally trying to be funny. Let's be very clear. That would be agenda driven, and that is not CCPT. So you're not trying to be funny, but a color commentator in baseball provides humor and insight. It's often more lighthearted dialogue than the main commentator. Why? Because the main commentator is describing the action on the field. When you start doing the narrative summary and the narrative commentary, all of a sudden there's some objectivity, there's some insight, there's bigger picture. Often it's more lighthearted. And this is where your personality is a little bit more on display, because it's conversational, it's interactive, it's dialogue driven. We're not just stringing a skill with a skill with a skill. We're going to track behavior, and then we're going to provide some narrative summary. We're going to track behavior, and then we're going to provide some narrative commentary. And this is so useful when a child is quietly playing and doing a repetitive, consistent type of play. They're moving cars 1 inch at a time across the floor for the entire hour. They're stacking blocks in a tower nonstop for the entire hour. They're shooting at a target with the crossbow nonstop for an hour. Saying nothing. You don't see a whole lot of emotion. It's just repetitive behavior. You get stuck in only having one reflective response option unless you start working in narrative summary, narrative commentary. So when you do that, it flows. Oh, okay. So now you're going to set up on the other side of the room before you shoot the target. Notice how different that is than you're shooting again. You can bring in just a natural flow to the whole process, and it gets you out of saying, I just feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again. And the kid gets annoyed. I get annoyed. Neither one of us like it, but I don't know what else to do. And I know, and you all quote me all the time, and for better or worse, that's why I try to be so careful with my words. I don't want them to be misconstrued. You all quote me and come back to me and say, and I know that I can't do my job if I don't talk. Yes, 100%. We cannot do our job if we don't talk. So then the pressure is, well, I have to say something. You moved that. You picked that up. You set that down. You put the cap on. You laid it down. You straightened them. Oh my gosh. We need some alternatives. That's where this comes in. So I hope my baseball analogy helps. By the way, next time you watch a baseball game, you're going to readily identify the main commentator and the color commentator, I guarantee you. And you're going to think about this episode. So you are welcome for that. I hope that this gives you some thought into how you can make your sessions flow, feel at ease, feel conversational. The purpose is relationship. And while just tracking behavior with that reflective response, it's not going to rupture the relationship by any means. It's adherent and it's necessary. So there's not going to be any fallout from that. But the relationship is going to feel more easy and more natural and more genuine when you work in some of this narrative commentary and narrative summary. So I hope that that is helpful. I hope that gives you some thoughts and ideas on what to do. If you want to reach out to me, please do. Brenna at thekidcounselor.com. And I just want to give you a little update. The CPRT training course through Corewell is officially edited and ready to go. So we are actively getting everything over to Joseph and Kate at Corewell, and we should be able to launch that this month. So this, for those of you that are going to listen to this later, this is May of 2025. So we are hoping to have that completely ready and CEU certification prepared for the end of May of 2025. So I know many of you have been waiting for that, and I apologize for how long it's taken. It's a lot of hours of content, and editing videos is a very slow and tedious process, but we have finally gotten there. We're really excited about that. And so many of you are wanting to add parent coaching to your suite of services. And CPRT is going to be such a helpful addition to your practice. And if you are a facilitator of that curriculum, it gives you the foundation so that you can really be effective in helping parents implement CCPT with their own children and obviously conduct play sessions in their homes, which is really meaningful. And so much research proves how effective that program is. So really looking forward to that for you all. Can't wait to officially launch, but it will be this month. So I wanted to let y'all know about that. I love y'all. Have a great week. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.